Hello everyone, welcome to Dnyanadeep. In this session, we are going to discuss one more previous year question from ethics paper. Here there is a question from 2023 paper, that is, corruption is the manifestation of the failure of core values in the society. In your opinion, what measures can be adopted to uplift the core values in society? Fine. So let us identify what are the various parts of this particular question. So first part is that corruption is the manifestation of failure of values in the society. This is my first part, where I have been asked on to address how there is failure in values of society and which is resulting into practices such as corruption. Fine. This is part 1 of the question. Now, have we been asked directly on this particular part of the question? No, we do not have been asked anything on this particular part of the question. In later body part, I will tell you what exactly needs to be done with this particular quote. Next, so we have to set this particular context and then we have to tell what measures can be adopted to uplift the core values in the society. So by and large, this particular question is focusing on identifying measures which will help us build core values in the society so that we stay away from malicious such as corruption. Fine. So I hope you have understood. There are two parts of the question. Now, if I have to identify the dimensions of this particular question or ethical dimensions which are involved in this particular question, these can be values of society. Fine. I am taking society as a whole and I have to address what values that society carries. That is one part. Another part which I have to address is that society is a source of values for an individual or be it an institution. Right. So this is somewhere present in our syllabus also, that society acts as a source, family acts as a source, our schools act as a source, and definitely our society also acts as a source when it comes to values which are being imbibed on an individual or on an institution, right? So these are some dimensions which are involved in this particular case. Now corruption or the practices such as corruption is also involved in this particular question, which is coming from degradation of social values. So that can be another dimension, but again that does not perfectly fit with our syllabus. So simply we say what dimensions we have: values of society and society as a source of values for individuals. So once I have identified dimensions, now I am very well clear with what I am going to write in this particular question. Now I'll tell you what I am going to write in this particular question. So what I will say, you see, there are some problems in society, right? So core values of society have tumbled down, have degraded. I'll give some examples or I can quote some examples towards it. And then I will say since these values have degraded, it has resulted into practices such as corruption. So that is my fundamental premise over which I am going to build my answer. And later part then I am going to explain how I will solve this problem, how I will make this society better so that there are no more problems with the core values of the society and malicious or problems such as corruption can be done away with. So this is in very simple words I have put here what all needs to be done. Now in introduction I am going to say that society is a fundamental source of value so that we have a ethical environment in our community or even at an institutional level or be it for an individual. So that this is my introduction. Now if you look at my introduction, it is very generic, right? Because if I try to write some definition, I would barely get any definition here to write. I certainly cannot define corruption in this particular question. Why? Because corruption is such an obvious thing that even children would know what corruption is. And in your answer, if you go on defining such obvious things, that certainly is not going to add any value to your question. Another way I could have introduced would be with the help of a fact. But again, that fact would not make my argument in terms of ethics very better, right? So since we are writing ethics paper, your introduction should look like an introduction of a ethics paper. It should not look like an introduction in the GS paper. So it may happen that you have a fact based on let us say some corruption perception in India, or the level of corruption in India, regarding that there are a lot of indices which are present, and you will quote that particular fact, but again this will make your answer as a GS answer and not as a ethics answer. So that is why I am refraining from mentioning any definition or any fact. So here what I have now, I have a very generic introduction where I am saying that society is a fundamental source of values for an individual, for let's say institution, and which is going to build a very ethical environment for our communities. So this is introduction for this particular question. Moving on, I will go and write the body part. Now what I am supposed to do in body part, let us understand that in body part there are actually two sections which we need to address. One, we have to address how failure of core values in society has led to corruption. That is one part which I need to address, and another part I have to address measures which I am going to take forward to. Now when it comes to this particular part, since it is a 150 word question, 10 marker, now if you address that particular part, it's good. Even if you do not address that particular part, even then it is going to be perfectly fine. Since it is you have to answer this particular question in 150 words, there is not much of a space you are being given. So certainly if you wish to address each and every single section of the particular question, it is not going to be possible. So what is not being asked directly can be skipped. Okay, so I'm suggesting you, even if you do not explain this particular part, it's perfectly fine. But if you can explain, let us say in 15 to 20 words, maybe with some example, that would be an ideal scenario. Okay, so just try to explain if possible in some 20 words or so, and say how there has been failure of values in society. You can quote any example for that matter and explain how it is resulting into corruption. So having addressed that particular part, now I will move on to the next part, the direct part, which has been directly asked, and then I am going to say how I am going to uplift core values of my society. Now for uplifting core values of society, the best way I have is to persuade. I will have to persuade whole of the society, be it at an individual level or be it at an community level, right? At both of the level, I will have to persuade them towards better values. Now, from where I am going to have these values, or from where I am going to imbibe these values on the society? In this particular part, I will have to say, see, when it comes to our societies, and typically Indian society is far more influenced by great personalities, right? Whatever great people we had, be it in history, be it in mythology, they have had a far reaching influence when it comes to imbibing certain values on our population. So I can take help of the values which have been given by Mahatma Gandhi. I can take help of values which have been given by great saints in this particular land. I can go back to Lord Rama for that matter, right? So whatever mythical leadership or mythical personalities we have, from there to present day real personalities, they are going to have a very cult impact on society. And if I can take values from those people, that would be the best way to persuade these people. So I'll say, see, I'm going to have teachings from great people, great leaders, reformers and administrators, and I can also invoke values from our socio-cultural and religious legacy. So whatever religious legacy we have, cultural legacy we have, social legacy we have, and in that I can quote some religious figures, I can quote some historical figures, I can quote some saints, fine, and all these are going to give me some values. You can choose your people, you can choose your personalities and their values so as to substantiate how you are going to persuade. I am not giving you any specific for this particular section. If you are writing this answer, try writing on these lines. It will help you. Now, having explained how I am going to do it, I will also have to illustrate with the help of examples. So in later part, I have also included a few examples how these great people have helped in imbibing great values for our society and resulted into avoiding any corrupt practices. Other ways I can go forward with giving examples with ethical leadership at local level, at national level, right? We need to have an ethical leadership, and if there is an ethical leadership which is heading a particular institution or which is heading a prominent place, they will definitely affect the core values of a society and result into better ethical standards. One more important thing which we need to identify here is the whistleblower protection. Sometimes it happens that society as a whole or individuals in the society as a part of it, they by themselves are not corrupt. They do not indulge in corrupt practices. But neither they speak about corrupt practices. Why they don't speak about corrupt practices? Because somewhere they have a fear of life. Because whosoever is involved in corrupt practices might act against these individuals who act against these corrupt practices or highlight these corrupt practices. And that is why we have a very, we need to have a very strong whistleblower protection in this particular case. Also, we need to have code of ethics. We need to teach our population what ethics is, and we need to give them certain code of ethics so that they are able to understand what are the best ethical practices, and accordingly they will carry out their businesses. So these are some ways in which I am going to uplift core values in our society. When it comes to example, in example I can give any case study, any example. I have example from Chauri Chora. It is the best ethical practice one can ever have. When it comes to Gandhi, Gandhi believed in non-violence, right? So when it comes to such a value which was being carried by Gandhi himself, he acts in this particular case, that of Chauri Chora. So you can provide this particular example how these great personalities have an influence on our society. Now, it may happen that this is not a typical case of corruption or the practice of corruption. The question was asking more about uplifting the ethical values of a society. Fine. And in that particular case, I am just giving you example when a great leader has helped in uplifting ethical values of a society. Similarly, when it comes to Raleigh Siddhi like scenario, that is best case example here, where we have that a particular personality is having an influence over the population, and as a result of that influence, we find that there are a lot of core values which are present in the society which is there in Raleigh Siddhi, and that society is very peaceful, very self-sustaining for that matter, and this is only possible because there was influence of great leaders or great personalities. Right? So these are a few examples to conclude with. Now, lastly, again I will sum up in a very generic manner where I am going to say, see, highlighting importance of society as a source of value is very essential for ethical governance and practicing ethics even at the individual level. Fine. So I have a very generic introduction and a generic conclusion. So it may happen in some of the questions we will not have very specific to write when it comes to introduction or conclusion. So it is perfectly fine in some of the or in one or two of the questions where you are writing very generic introduction and conclusion. Do not try to write something which does not fit in. So what happens, sometimes we have a tendency, since we see that there is a generic introduction or generic conclusion, and then we don't want to write that generic introduction or generic conclusion. So to avoid that, we bring in something fancy, and that fancy doesn't fit in with your answer. So that is how you are going to lose your marks again. Right? So that is why, since I have nothing much special to write in the conclusion, what I am going to do, I am going to write a very generic conclusion. So that is how I was supposed to approach this particular question. If you think there is something different can be done on your part, please write in comment box and we will build some better answers out of this discussion. Thank you again. See you in next session.